She left me a grocery list. That was the first thing she said to me in 16 days. Not a good morning. Not a sorry I've been distant. Just a sticky note on the fridge. We're out of oat milk. Get the one I like. Not the cheap one. I stared at that stupid note for 5 full minutes. That was what I got after more than 2 weeks of silence from the woman I married. A list. It was handwritten in her usual loopy cursive, with a little heart over the I in milk. I don't know why, but that broke me. Not the silence. Not the nights she turned her back to me in bed. Not the way she always had somewhere to be at dinner time. But that damn heart over the I. Like she was mocking me with nostalgia. 16 days ago, we were in the same house, under the same roof, breathing the same air, and she acted like I didn't exist. No fights. No yelling. Just a switch flipped. She turned off, and I kept trying to pretend we were still okay. I'd say, "Good morning," and she'd walk past me. I'd text her during lunch. "You doing all right?" Nothing. I left a note on her pillow once. It was still there 3 days later, unopened, like a dead letter. The night before the sticky note appeared, she came home, wearing perfume I didn't recognize. I asked, "Did you change your scent?" She looked through me, just peeled off her coat and said, "I'm tired," and locked herself in the bathroom. The light under the door stayed on till 2 a.m. She wasn't tired. She just didn't want to talk to me. And yet, here she was the next day, trusting me to go buy her favorite brand of oat milk. Like I was the butler. Like I was the assistant in a house I used to call home. You ever look at someone and realize they've already left you, but you're still standing there, holding on to the pieces they dropped? That was me. In the kitchen, with a sticky note. I drove to the store. I didn't buy the oat milk. I sat in the parking lot with my forehead against the steering wheel for 40 minutes, trying not to cry in front of a guy unloading pumpkins. Then I drove back. Quiet. Still no word from her. She was in the bedroom, texting someone. She smiled. Smiled. For the first time in weeks. Not for me. Not because of me. That night, I slept on the couch again. But this time, I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling and made a plan. Because I knew. I knew something was going on. Something bad. Something final. And I was done being the only one pretending we were still us. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. And the next morning, I didn't walk into the kitchen. I walked out of the house. And that's when everything started to unravel. I didn't slam the door when I left. I wanted to, God knows I wanted to, but something about silence felt more powerful now. I walked out that morning with no shoes on, just socks, keys in my hoodie pocket, and a sinking feeling in my chest that I couldn't shake. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't sit one more minute in that house pretending not to notice the lipstick-stained wine glass in the sink that didn't match any color she owned, or the cologne that lingered in the hallway after she'd gone to yoga. Hazel hated yoga, said it made her feel like a pretzel being tortured. I walked down the block, past our neighbor's barking dog, past the rusted swing set we were supposed to sell 3 years ago, and I ended up on a bench outside the grocery store. Yeah, the same one where I didn't buy the oat milk. I sat there for almost 2 hours, watching strangers live lives that didn't look like they were falling apart. And then I did something I didn't plan. I called her mom. I hadn't spoken to Valerie in months. Not since the last Thanksgiving where Hazel forgot to tell me they moved it to her sister's house, and I showed up alone at her parents' place like an idiot. But Valerie answered. And the moment I said, "Hey, it's Reese," there was a pause, then a sigh. Not surprised. Not excited. Just a slow, tired sigh like she'd been expecting this call. I didn't even have to explain much. I just said, "Has she said anything to you?" And she replied, "You should come over. I think we need to talk." I didn't know what I expected. Maybe a pep talk. Maybe some reassurance that this was just a phase. But what I got instead made my blood run cold. Valerie didn't beat around the bush. She sat me down, handed me a cup of tea, and said, "Hazel has been seeing someone else. For over 4 months. She told me she'd end it. She swore it wasn't serious." My hands were shaking so badly I spilled the tea. I remember trying to ask questions, but they came out as broken noises. Valerie looked at me with pity, the kind that made me want to scream. She told me his name was Marcus, a co-worker, that Hazel had been staying late at the office, but it wasn't because of deadlines. That she had even lied about a business trip to Chicago when she was actually at a cabin in Vermont with him. She showed me texts. I didn't ask her to, but she said I deserved the truth. I'll never forget one. "Reese is too nice. I feel nothing when I'm around him." That one hit like a baseball bat to the ribs. I thanked her. Well, I think I mumbled something and walked out. I couldn't drive. I walked all the way home with a ringing in my ears and a tightness in my chest I can't describe. When I got back, Hazel was in the kitchen. She looked up from her phone, and for the first time in over 2 weeks, she spoke to me without being prompted. She said, "Did you get the milk?" And that's when something inside me, finally, fully, snapped. I didn't answer her. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw it for the first time. Not just the emotional distance, not just the unfamiliar perfume or the constant silence. I saw the indifference, the complete, effortless detachment in her face. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't even curious about where I'd been. She just wanted to know if I'd remembered her oat milk. I could have been anyone, some stranger in her house, some guy she barely tolerated. And still, I said nothing. I went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed we hadn't shared in weeks, and stared at my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I waited. And 15 minutes later, she walked in, phone in hand, no eye contact, and started changing clothes like I wasn't even there. I whispered, "Who's Marcus?" She froze. Just for a second. A flicker in her eyes. Then she turned to me, calm as ever, and said, "You went to my mother?" My voice cracked. I hate how weak I sounded, but I said, "Is it true?" She sighed. Not guilty, not ashamed, just annoyed. "It's not what you think," she said, like that phrase means anything anymore. "It just happened, and it's over." Over? Like I was supposed to thank her for her generosity? Like I should feel relieved that the affair had an expiration date? I asked, "When were you going to tell me?" She didn't answer. I kept going. "You've ignored me for 2 weeks. You slept with someone else. You lied to my face. And now you're standing there like I'm the one making things complicated." Still, no apology. Just this dismissive shrug that said everything her silence hadn't. "I needed time," she said, pulling on a sweatshirt, "to figure out what I want." My whole body felt like it was buzzing, like my own skin didn't fit anymore. "And what did you figure out?" I asked. She met my eyes, finally, and said, "That I don't want to be with someone who needs constant reassurance to function." That one sentence knocked the breath out of me. I was stunned. I felt like a kicked dog, blinking up at its owner wondering what it had done wrong. That's when I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just said, "You've got everything figured out then. That's good, because so do I." And I walked out again. But this time, I didn't stop at the park bench. I went straight to my friend Jonah's place and told him everything. He didn't laugh this time. He just looked at me and said, "You've been holding on to a ghost, man. And ghosts don't come back. They haunt." That night, I made my choice. And the next morning, Hazel would wake up to the consequences of the silence she wrapped herself in. Because I'd spent the night not just grieving, but preparing. I didn't go back home that night, and for the first time in weeks, I actually felt something. Not peace, exactly, but clarity. I sat in Jonah's cluttered guest room surrounded by empty pizza boxes and bad movie posters, staring at my laptop as I typed out a list. Not a grocery list. A to-do list for detachment. Call the bank. Cancel the joint credit card. Freeze the savings account. Back up all files from the home computer. Change my emergency contact at work. I wasn't sure if I was leaving for good or just drawing a line in the sand, but something had shifted, and I needed to act before I chickened out again. Jonah offered me a beer, but I couldn't swallow anything. My stomach was in knots. Still, I didn't sleep. I stayed up scrolling through every memory I had of Hazel. Our photos, our old texts, even our wedding video, which I'd apparently saved under a folder called Forever. It felt like watching a movie I barely remembered starring someone I used to love. The next morning, I texted her, "You won't find me home today. I'll be in touch." No hi. No love you. Just a boundary. She didn't respond. Of course she didn't. But an hour later, I checked our shared cloud storage and saw that she had just deleted over 700 photos. Our vacations. Our birthdays. The day we got our dog, Ripley. Gone. Like our life had been a cluttered inbox she finally decided to clean out. That was the moment something cold settled inside me. She wasn't mourning anything. She was scrubbing me from her existence. So I made a second list. This one wasn't digital. I wrote it in ink, on paper, like it meant something. The people I'd tell. The things I'd take. The questions I deserved answers to. That same afternoon, I showed up at her office unannounced. I sat in the lobby with a coffee I didn't drink and watched as she walked by me, holding hands with someone. I couldn't see his face clearly, but it didn't matter. She froze the second our eyes met. Her hand dropped from his like it had been burned. I stood up, calm on the outside, but my knees were jelly. She walked over like I was some stalker causing a scene. "Reese, what are you doing here?" she whispered, trying to keep her voice low. I said, "Just wanted to see the yoga instructor." Her face drained of color. The man behind her blinked, looked at me, then back at her. "This your husband?" he asked. Hazel didn't answer. I turned to the guy, offered a handshake, and said, "Don't worry." She told me it was over. I just wanted to meet the guy who finished the job. He didn't shake my hand. Hazel grabbed his arm and muttered something I couldn't hear, pulling him away like I was a bomb about to go off. I didn't follow. I just watched them disappear through the glass doors. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand, not because I was stronger or braver, but because I was finally awake. She'd burned the bridge. Now I was holding the matches. I didn't go home after the office encounter. I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town and paid cash for 3 nights. The room smelled like mildew and disappointment, but for once, at least the silence was honest. No passive-aggressive footsteps, no texts left unread, no fake smiles. Just me, my thoughts, and a cracked bathroom mirror that made me wonder if I even recognized the guy staring back. I sat on the floor for hours with my laptop, digging into accounts, receipts, timelines. Not because I wanted to torture myself, but because I needed the truth, the whole thing, no matter how ugly it was. I used to think emotional cheating was somehow better than physical, but now, seeing the depth of her planning, the careful deletion of texts, the fake meetings and business trips, I realized the emotional betrayal hurt worse. Because she chose to keep me in the dark while she built a fantasy life somewhere else. And then came the part one wasn't ready for. I found a Venmo payment from our joint account 2 weeks ago. A weekend getaway. The note just said, "Cabin red heart." That little red heart felt like a knife in my ribs. I zoomed in on the transaction, traced the location, and recognized it. Her coworker, Marcus, had posted photos on his public profile. A scenic lake, a glass of wine on the porch, and in one photo, barely visible in the reflection of the window behind him, her. Hazel, wearing the hoodie I bought her for our 3rd anniversary. She wasn't even trying to hide anymore. And somehow, even through the pain, I laughed. Not a normal laugh, a dry, shaky wheeze that turned into a sob halfway through. This was the woman I cooked for, cried in front of, trusted with my worst moments. And she gave more honesty to a man she's known for 4 months than to the husband who stayed by her side through unemployment, panic attacks, and her dad's cancer. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching headlights pass by the highway, thinking about all the apologies I'll never get. But the next morning, something shifted. I checked my email, and there it was. A message from Hazel. The subject line just read, "We need to talk." No punctuation, no warmth, just that. Inside, she said she noticed some of our bank accounts had been frozen and asked if I was trying to send a message. She even ended it with, "I think we can still fix this if you just talk to me instead of acting out." Acting out? I wanted to scream. Acting out was her pretending I didn't exist. She shattered us. But somehow, now I was the unstable one because I finally stopped playing the role of a doormat. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because I wasn't done preparing. And this time, when I confronted her, I wouldn't be asking questions. I'd be showing her what silence feels like when it cuts both ways. I didn't write her back. I wanted to. I wanted to unleash everything I'd been swallowing for the past year. But something told me she didn't want a conversation. She wanted control. So instead, I replied with a silence of my own. Not just ignoring her email, but taking back the pieces of my life she still had her hands in. I started small. Canceled the auto pay on her car insurance, which I'd been covering without a word. Then I called our landlord and asked about removing one of the tenants from the lease. Just asked questions, didn't file anything yet, but I could tell it would plant seeds. I updated my mailing address with the bank. Quiet moves. No drama. But each one felt like a stitch being cut from the quilt of a life I'd once begged to hold together. That afternoon, I drove back to the house while she was at work. I had exactly 90 minutes. I didn't pack everything, just the things that mattered. My laptop, the photo of my dad and I fishing when I was 9, the birthday card she gave me 3 years ago that said, "Even when I'm mad at you, I still know I picked the right man." I stared at that card longer than I should have. It didn't even feel like her handwriting anymore. I grabbed it anyway. Then I went to the drawer where we kept the spare phones, the old models we hadn't traded in, and powered one up. I don't know what made me check, but when I opened the old iPhone and it finished booting, I saw something I'll never forget. Hazel had used this backup phone during the cabin weekend. Maybe she forgot to wipe it. Maybe she just didn't care. Either way, I saw everything. Messages with Marcus that went way beyond flirtation. I'm talking full-on planning. How they'd live together, when they'd announced the separation, how long they'd wait before he moved in. One message from her made my skin crawl. He's too soft. He won't fight me. I'll just act cold until he gets tired and leaves. Easier that way. I sat on the edge of the bed. Our bed, phone shaking in my hand, heart pounding so hard I thought I might black out. I took photos of every screen, every thread, every timestamp. Then I left the phone exactly where I found it. If she thought I was soft, I'd let her keep thinking that, for now. I drove back to the motel and started drafting a letter. Not to her. To her job's ethics committee. Turns out Marcus wasn't just a coworker. He was her direct report. Office romance policies be damned. This wasn't love. It was leverage. It was a pattern. And I was done being the only one with scars. The next move would be surgical. Controlled. I was no longer a heartbroken husband. I was a man reclaiming his name from someone who had already erased it. Hazel still didn't know I'd been in the house, and I planned to keep it that way for exactly 24 more hours. That night at the motel, I sat on the edge of the stained mattress drafting the most careful, most calculated email I'd ever written. It wasn't petty. It wasn't emotional. It was structured, factual, and attached to 36 screenshots that painted a clear picture of an ethics violation brewing inside a company that branded itself as progressive and family first. I used a burner email, no signature, just the subject line. Your senior associate Hazel M. and her direct subordinate Marcus T. Inappropriate relationship with evidence. Then I pressed send and stared at the screen for a long time. I don't know what I was expecting, some cinematic thunderclap, a feeling of justice, but all I felt was tired. Hollow. And yet, lighter. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Hazel. No voicemail. Just missed calls. All from 7 a.m. onward. Then came the text. We need to talk. Now. I didn't answer. Not yet. I knew she knew something had shifted, but I wanted her to squirm. Just a little. That evening, around 6:40, I got a message from Jonah. All it said was, "Bro, Hazel just showed up at your old place. She looks like she saw a ghost." I had given him the spare key to grab some of my things, and apparently Hazel had walked in expecting me to be there, probably rehearsing whatever twisted apology or damage control speech she'd prepared. But I was gone. And when she realized that, when she saw the closet half empty, my name removed from the Wi-Fi, and the folder labeled "Divorce Lawyer" on the kitchen table, she finally called me. I answered. Calm voice. Dead inside. "Hello," I said. She started with her usual tactic, acting like I was the unreasonable one. "Reese, what the hell is going on? Are you trying to ruin my life?" I almost laughed. "No," I said. "You did that yourself. I just told the truth." She paused. "You sent something to my office." I let the silence answer. She started begging. Actually begging, saying it was a mistake, that she was vulnerable, that it wasn't serious, and that nothing physical even happened until after we started falling apart. That last part hit me like a slap. Not the denial, not the gaslighting, but the casualness of it. Like emotional abandonment was just a natural phase in a modern marriage. I let her talk. I wanted to hear it all. She said I was overreacting, that I was trying to punish her for needing space, that I was twisting the narrative to feel like a victim. But here's the thing. I was done being the victim. So I said, "Hazel, you told someone I was too soft to fight back. You were right about the first part. Not anymore." And I hung up. No screaming. No tears. Just a clean click. After 16 days of silence, she finally heard mine. And I promise you, it rang louder than anything I could have said. She didn't call again after that night. Not once. No apologies. No explanations. No attempts to fix the wreckage she left behind. And honestly, I was fine with that. Something about hanging up that call, it shifted the entire rhythm of my life. I spent the next few weeks in silence, not the dead kind that hung between us in that house, but the kind that actually healed. I got my own place, a small loft above a bookstore with creaky floors and a leaky faucet, but it was mine. Every noise had meaning. Every quiet moment wasn't a punishment, but a choice. For the first time in years, I started doing things I used to love before I became the guy trying to keep his marriage alive. I picked up my old acoustic guitar, started going on evening runs, cooked full meals for myself instead of just takeout containers and sad sandwiches. Jonah helped me repaint the apartment one Saturday, and we ended up laughing so hard over a spilled can of blue that the neighbors complained. I didn't care. I laughed louder. A month after I cut contact with Hazel, I got a letter from her, handwritten, 2 pages. She said she lost her job, that Marcus had been reassigned to another branch, that she was in therapy. She said she didn't blame me, that she understood now why I did what I did. But she didn't ask for me back, and I didn't want her to. I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer, and never opened it again. Some things don't need closure, they just need distance. And that was enough for me. 6 weeks later, I met someone. Totally unplanned. Her name was Elise. We sat next to each other at a small poetry reading I only went to because I was trying to say yes to life again. She laughed at a line I didn't understand and leaned over to whisper a sarcastic comment that made me choke on my water. We talked afterward. For hours. She didn't know anything about my past, and I didn't volunteer it right away. We talked about books, music, childhood stories. What kind of soup we'd eat for the rest of our lives if we could only pick one. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized something. Not everyone will treat your love like a chore. Not everyone will turn silence into a weapon. Some people speak gently. Show up honestly. Love without needing to erase you to feel alive. I'm not saying it was all worth it, but I will say this. Sometimes, losing the wrong person is the only way you'll ever make space for the right one. And this time, I'm not afraid of being too soft. I'm proud of it, because softness didn't make me weak. It's what finally made me whole.